See that the reason why we don't see the source of our problems is that the means by which we try to solve them are the source. So, but that may seem strange to somebody who's first heard it, because our whole culture prides itself on thought as its highest achievement, and it's the achievements of thought, I'm not trying to say, are negligible. They are very great achievements in technology and various other ways, and culture. But there's another side to it which is leading to our destruction that we have to look at. So now, what is wrong? I'll try to say what is wrong with thought. I'll try to give some brief summary, and we might start talking about it if you like. Well, one of the obvious things wrong with it is fragmentation. That the thought is breaking things up into bits which should not be broken up. You see, we can see this going on. We see the world is broken up into nations. It's all broken up, and yet the world is all one, right? And see, the nation, we have the boundary of the nation. You say we've established a nation. Now that's invented by thought, right? If you go to the edge of the nation, there's nothing there particular, unless somebody made a fence, right? Now, then you have professional groups. If you are in science, you see every little specialty is fragmented from every other, and people hardly know what's happening in a somewhat different field, and it goes on. Knowledge is fragmented. Everything gets broken up. You see, now what is broken up is something. In other words, what we are doing is establishing boundaries where really there's a close connection. That's what's wrong with fragmentation. And at the same time trying to establish unity where there isn't any, or not very much, right? Inside the boundary we say we're all one, but when you look at all these groups, they're not all one at all, right? They're all fighting each other inside as much as they're fighting outside. So we have false division and false unification, right? In other words, thought is pretending that there's a sharp division here and really everything is unified inside, when it's all not so. So this is a fictional way of thinking. The question is, we say, to go on with this fictional way of thinking seems to be very important. It's so important that the actual fact that it's wrong is ignored. You see, so that it's not that way at all. Right? So, see, then it seems strange. Why should people do such a strange thing? See, it seems it's really could be thought of as irrational, or at the very least, or crazy, perhaps. That. So much trouble is created out of such small things, right? Well, now that's only. But then that's fragmentation is itself a symptom of some more general difficulty with thought, or a particular case of it, right? Because there's a more general difficulty with thought, is that thought is very active and participatory. It's always doing a great deal, but it is tending to say it hasn't done anything. But it's just telling you the way things are, right? You see, thought has created everything you see here in this building around. It has affected how all the trees are. It has affected the mountains. It has affected the plains and the farms and the factories and the science and technology. And even at the South Pole, you have quite a bit of. You have the destruction of the ozone layer, which is basically due to thought, because people thought that they want to have a refrigerant, a nice, safe refrigerant, and they built this all up by thinking more and more about it, and now we have the ozone layer, you see, being destroyed. So see, thought has produced tremendous effects outwardly, and we'll discuss further on. It produces tremendous effects inwardly in each person, and yet the general tacit assumption in thought is that it's just telling you the way things are, not doing anything, and that you are inside there deciding what to do with that information. But I want to say that you don't decide what to do with the information. The information takes over and runs you. You see, that thought runs you. But it also gives the false information that you are running it, right? That you are the one who controls thought, whereas thought is the one who controls each one of us, right? We don't, until thought is understood, which, or better yet, more than understood, perceived, it will actually control us. but create the impression that it is our servant. That it's just doing what we want it to do. See, that's the difficulty. The thought is participating, and then saying it's not participating, it's taking part, it's in everything. Now, fragmentation is a particular case of that. You see, thought is creating divisions out of itself, and then saying they're there naturally. The divisions between nations are regarded as being just there, you see. But obviously they were invented by people, and people came to accept them, and that made them be there. Right? Therefore, in saying that thought has this character, that it is doing something and says it didn't do it. Now, we have to really go into that, because we could discuss that a great deal, because what it's doing is very much more subtle than I've said. That's only the beginning. Now, then again, another problem with fragmentation is that thought divides from feeling and from the body. Thought is said to be the mind, some sort of abstract or spiritual or immaterial, if we have that feeling. And then you have the body, very physical, and then you have emotions somewhere in between, perhaps. And the ideas, they're all different, right? Now, we think of them as different, and we experience them as different because we think of them as different, right? But see, thought is not so different from emotion. If you think something, if you think that a certain person has treated you badly, you will get angry, you see. We'll discuss that more later, but a very elementary example is that if somebody keeps you waiting for a couple of hours, and you can get very angry thinking, you know, what does he mean treating me like this? You know, he has no consideration for me, and you can think of various things, he's always doing it and so on. By thinking that way, you can get very angry, and then if he comes and says the train was late, it goes, so it shows it's thought, right? By changing your thought, the anger evaporates. So thought at least sustains that feeling. And you can see that thought of something pleasant will make you feel good. You see the thought that you're doing well or great will make you feel good inside. The adrenaline will be, you know, all the good feelings will come out. And the thought that you have done something wrong, or the thought that you're guilty, may make you feel miserable. If somebody says you are guilty, which is a thought, then you can feel very miserable, right? So feelings are tremendously affected by thoughts, and obviously thoughts are tremendously affected by feelings, because if you're angry, you don't think clearly. Now, if you have a feeling of pleasure in something, you may find yourself reluctant to give up the idea that gives you pleasure, even if it's wrong. Right? You engage in self-deception. Therefore, they're intimately and closely related. The very wish to think must come from an emotion or from an impulse to think, so they're really almost two sides of the same process, right? But our language separates them, and our thought separates them. They're fragmented. You see, we introduce in our thought a very sharp division, just like between nations, where there really isn't such a division. As we're introducing a fictional way of thinking about this situation. And if our thinking is fictional, it will mislead us. I mean, now, that's really... so we have this question that emotions and intellect are closely connected, and I think it's worth repeating what I've said the last 2 years, that in the language we have a distinction, thinking and thought. Right? Thinking is the present sense of the thing, and some activity going on, which may include some critical sensitivity to what may go wrong, and also some new ideas and perception of some kind of insight occasionally. But then thought is the past of that. So thinking doesn't disappear. Another idea we have is that when we've been thinking something, it just goes, but it doesn't. It goes somehow into the brain and leaves something, a trace, which becomes thought, right? And a thought now acts automatically. So therefore, if you have been thinking for a while that I have a good reason to be angry, it's there, and then you remain angry. But I see what we have to do is to see some sort of notion of where what sort of trouble we're in now. Right? In other words, we started out saying the trouble is the world is in chaos, but I think we end up by saying that thought is in chaos, right? And that's each one of us. And that is the origin of the world in chaos, right? And the chaos of the world comes back and adds to the chaos of thought. So the point is that they're not following, you see, that they're not aware of the effects of their thought, right? That the fact thought is active, participating. Now you see, there is this feeling that when you are thinking something, it does nothing except inform you of the way things are. And then you choose to do something and you do it. That's the way people are talking, right? But the way you think determines the way you're going to do it. And then you don't notice a result comes back, right? You don't see it as a result of what you've done, or even less do you see it as a result of how you were thinking. Unless their thinking changes, it won't be corrected. Now, nothing you do can change their thinking, right? Except communication to them that they're incoherent, communication which they will accept and understand. Is that clear? Otherwise, you are trying to meet thought with force, really, and it's kind of violence. You see, if you say out there are some people behaving incoherently, and I will try to make them behave coherently, then you're using force, right? But they keep on thinking the same old way. If you're more powerful than they are, they will do what you want for a while until you get to be a little weak, and they'll take care of you then. Yes, it takes over. And why does it take over? You see, the point is, there are two levels of this point. One is to describe what happens as far as we can see outwardly, and secondly, to see the source of it, right? Because unless we see the source of it, it will never change. We need some kind of awareness of what thought is doing, let's put it that way. That seems clear. But which we don't have, generally speaking.